So today I'm going to be talking about breakups. All things breakups, you know, attending to yourself in the aftermath of a breakup, what comes up for some people when relationships end, um, and also maybe reasons that you can reflect on as they why they end a relationship. Maybe signs that a relationship isn't good for your mental health, if it's impacting your quality of life or your like sense of self. I think all these things are somewhat connected and can overlap. So I could talk about this literally for ages. So I'm just going to dive in and I'll get stuck in. So, in the aftermath of a breakup, like when you know you're definitely done, you're going to have mixed feelings. And I like to think of breakups, especially, without getting into the whole conversation about how long the relationship lasted. I still view it through the lens of grief because at the end of the day, it was an attachment. It was a significant part of your life. The person was in your life for X amount of time. You spent a lot of time with them. You opened up with them. You shared memories with them. You know, and this is all hypothetical. That was say a half decent relationship. Um, and you're going to grieve that loss. There's a whole adjustment phase that happens in the aftermath of that, and people have a lot of mixed feelings that they have to learn to process and regulate. They also have to attend to themselves, and there's so much overwhelm in the aftermath of a breakup for people. Sometimes people get fixated on what are other people going to think or feel. First and foremost, your responsibility is to yourself, attending to yourself, looking after your mental health, getting yourself grounded, regulating your emotions, getting yourself supported. Um, Sometimes this is a bit challenging for me to talk about because I'm also conscious that there's lots of people that listen, with different backgrounds and different sets of circumstances. So I'm going to try and make this as broad as I can. I'm not going to generalize because it's not going to apply in all cases, but just putting that out there so that if you're listening to this, that it's not going to fit in every circumstances. 'Cause some people have to co-parent and some people have other things going on. But when relationships end, and you're taking a wee bit of time to kind of attend to yourself, you need people around you to support you. You need your support network. You need to allow yourself to talk about it as and when you're ready. You're probably going to need a bit of space initially just to process everything that's going on. But once you know that it's done, that it's absolutely done, there's no going back. Neither person's interested in revisiting the relationship. In the aftermath of this, it's about giving yourself time to grieve the loss. And also to look back on it and learn from it. You know, what will you take from the relationship that you actually really are thankful for? Maybe not in the immediacy of it ending, but within time, like what are you thankful for? What positive elements of the relationship did you experience? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about how you showed up in the relationship? Did you tone yourself down? Were you able to be your authentic self? Were you able to ask for what you want? What did you notice about conflict? We're having the same arguments over the same things. Is there anything in the aftermath of this relationship ending that has clicked for you? That you're starting to see things in a different way. Is there anything that you've learned about yourself or about your partner that has changed now since this has ended? Maybe in the aftermath of the relationship ending, they've done something you really couldn't believe that they've done. They might have went out and slept with somebody. They might have done something really disrespectful or demeaning. They might have done something very insensitive. They might have been very cold or distant. Is there anything that's happened now that has changed your perception? Is there anything that you need to allow yourself to grieve? So to me, the grief in this sense is the shared identity, the we-ness. I know it's a weird word, but if you think of the self as I and the couple as the we, the actual shared identity of the relationship has to be grieved. The idea of what it was, the romanticized idea of what it could have been, and also that shared future that was in place. All that kind of has to be gradually let go of and processed. And there's sadness that can come up for that. There's anger, there can be disappointment, there can be hurt, there can be frustration, there can be so many mixed feelings. And that might be something that you might need to give yourself a wee bit of time to mourn, especially if this was a relationship that lasted a fairly significant length of time. Um, and you need to kind of tune into yourself. Like, what do you actually need to get through this? What kind of support do you need? Do you need to be in a routine? Do you need structure? Do you need your friends and family around you? Do you need to go and speak to somebody? Do you need to attend to the different parts of the self? Do you need to connect back to yourself, find a sense of confidence? Do you need to just allow yourself to feel these heavier emotions and be with them and process the loss in its entirety? Like, it's going to be very, very different for everybody. One of the things that you might really reflect on in the aftermath of a breakup is, what boundaries am I going to need to put in place with this person, for my own peace of mind, and also maybe boundaries with yourself. So, boundaries with yourself is an interesting one. So, that could be, despite how you're feeling, not reaching out. Because, when you create contact and you start to open up that access, that gets the ball rolling, that can lead to situations happening that maybe you don't actually want, but you might be doing that just to buffer how you're feeling. Boundaries for yourself could be not going to places that you know that the ex partner is going to be in, not reaching out to their friends or family, not stalking their social media, checking in on them. I say stalking loosely, but you know what I mean. Not going through their social media and checking and seeing what they're doing, who they're following, what they're at. Like in the aftermath of that, that's going to be a form of masochism because it's going to hurt you. There's things you may or may not see that will fuck knows what way it's going to affect you basically. But what's under your control is what you consume, what you look at, what you allow yourself to see. And I think like that is a boundary that can be hard for people because the curiosity and the not knowing can get the better of them. But I think like not having that boundary with yourself is important, but also potentially having that boundary with the ex as well. Maybe cutting contact so they can't email you, can't phone you, they're not contacting your friends and family. They're also not showing up to like your place of work or the places that you go. And naturally that changes, if there's kids and stuff involved. One of the big things that I think people often need to reflect on as well in the aftermath of a breakup is how do they feel about themselves? Has your sense of self changed? Has your sense of self worth changed? How are you viewing yourself now as a human being? Do you still see yourself as being good enough, worthy of love, and all the rest of it? This is a bit more meaningful, I think, when there's been a betrayal, and that is a slightly different conversation. Especially if there's been infidelity or if there's been something really traumatic that's happened that's led to the escalation of a breakup. But I think, like, talking about breakups, just to be clear, I think it would be good to kind of highlight things that are a bit maybe worrying about a relationship that's not goofy. So, see if you find that you can't really use your voice to communicate, to ask for what you want and need within reason. Not within reason, the fuck I'm on about. To communicate and ask for what you need, that's not good. Like, if you find that you're holding back, really, really holding back regularly on certain conversations, that would allow you to get your needs met or have like an equal quality of life, that's not good, especially if you're walking on eggshells. You're not really fully safe and secure in that environment. And if there's constant ups and downs of conflict, seemingly out of nowhere or over very, very minor or trivial things, that's an indication that something's not working. And also, like, there's bound to be patterns there at play. There's probably deeper reasons as to why that's happening. But regular like conflict's normal in a relationship, but like a lot of conflict a lot of the time, especially in the container of the relationship where you feel like this is the norm and it has been the norm for a very, very long time. You feel like you're constantly at each other. That's not good because that will have an impact on your mental health. It'll have an impact on your confidence, your sense of self. And it's also normalizing a behavior that you really shouldn't be experiencing, that often. Like conflict's normal, but it doesn't have to lead to really, really big fights. Um, any kind of like emotionally manipulative behavior, if you're being guilt tripped, if you're being coerced, if you're being put down or demeaned, any kind of abusive behavior at all, to me, deal breaker. It's just one of those things. Like your mental health, your entire concept of self is completely diminished and impacted the longer you stay in an abusive relationship. Being belittled by a partner, being demeaned by a partner, being used by a partner, coerced, controlled, all those things, they're just really, really serious worrying signs that a relationship's not goofy. If you feel like you're being put down, or you feel ashamed, or if you feel like belittled or ridiculed by your partner, like they're not good signs. Like that relationship is having a damaging effect. And that all comes back to safety as well, like how the person's treating you, how they're showing off for you, um, their behavior and that. And like you can't thrive in an abusive environment. You can't heal in an abusive environment. And it's not they say that there needs to be visible signs of abuse for a relationship not to be goofy. There can be other elements of play that are just not functioning. But if all those things that I just mentioned, if they're there, if you're constantly feeling drained, exhausted, resentful, frustrated, nothing seems to be changing. Every time you try to, broach a conversation, there's an escalation, there's an argument, you're being shut down or shut out, or there's excessive anger. You don't feel safe. You just feel overwhelmed a lot of the time. You feel like you have to tone yourself down, put all your needs on the back burner. Like all those things are clear signs that the relationship's not good in my perspective. But the thing is, people can become really attached. You can still want this to work. You might want it more than they want it. And depending on your self-esteem and your self-worth, you might tolerate it, you might accept it because, at times you've got this steep juxtaposition of the partner being kind or being affectionate, or the intimacy or the quality time together is nice, or you find yourself reflecting a lot on the past, like moments that were good, or maybe you've had a string of really fucking horrible relationships and there's elements of this that's good, but it's also compared with like really, really fucking steep um, problematic behavior, like everything I just mentioned, so that you accept it. Maybe it's coming from a place of being afraid of being in your own, or as I mentioned earlier, worried about what other people might think. There's lots and lots of reasons why people will stay in a scenario like that, especially if they've grown up in dynamics where maybe there was a lot of conflict on the family of origin, or there was relational templates that are similar to this that are playing out. But the thing is, like, this is part of why you reflect on the aftermath of a relationship. Like, what can you learn? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about the conflict? What did you learn about your communication? What can you take personal responsibility for? Because look, sometimes we fuck things up. We say things we don't mean to say. We say things in the heat of the moment, or when we're arguing, or we don't realize that maybe we needed to learn how to self-soothe, or take a time out and go and fucking ground ourselves and come back and revisit the conversation when we're calmer. Or maybe that's something that one of the partners maybe needs to do, because they don't have that level of self-awareness. There's a lot of stuff that's going on maybe with them that's having an impact on the partner. But there's just, I think, in the aftermath of a relationship, especially if you're really, really upset and you're really sad about it, I like to call the brain, like the subconscious, the highlight reel, because when you're going through this adaptation period where you're lonely and you're trying to get used to being in your own space, your brain gives you the highlight reel. You get all the nostalgia. You start to think about all the good times, all the things that person done for you. And I think it's the subconscious's way of saying, something's changed. You don't feel safe. The environment now feels scary. And then you start to romanticize this idea of who that person was. And we start to forget about all the shit that was problematic. We start to think about all the things that could have been, as opposed to what they actually were like day to day, how they were treating you, the impact that was having on yourself, your quality of self esteem, your confidence, how they were showing off you in the relationship. Were they taking you for granted? Were they, abusive towards you? Were they demeaning? Were they exploitative? Were they just not bothered? Were they not making an effort? Were they doing anything disrespectful or demeaning? Were they not wanting to work on the relationship or invest in the relationship? And all those things get overlooked, when you're going through that adaptation period, because you're grieving the loss, you're missing that connection, you're in that place of loneliness and overwhelm and fear. And some people think like, oh fuck, well, it's better the pain of what I know than the fear of what I don't know. And then they can cling to it for comfort, or they might reach out when they get overwhelmed. And then you put other things like alcohol into the mix, and people make really, really kind of decisions that can come back and bite them. And that's why I'm saying sometimes, like with boundaries, you have to have these boundaries for yourself. Like when you're done and you're done, you have to establish that boundary with yourself. Like, I'm not going to check up on this person's social media. I'm not going to reach out to them. I'm not going to give them access to me, and I'm not going to try and seek access from them. And it's difficult, but it's one of those things that I think can help people in the aftermath of a breakup. Now, all that being said, I could literally talk about this for hours because there's so much that can come into this. But obviously, where there's been abuse, any kind of abusive behavior, and there's been traumatic episodes, people need to go to get support through that. There's a lot of work that has to then go back and they rebuilding the self, building up the self-worth, the self-confidence, unlearning the conditioning that fed into that person tolerating that behavior in the first place. And it's not to say like, why did you tolerate it? Because safety, they might have been they might have been fearful. Or it could just be that there's elements of their communication style or their conditioning, or that naturally put them in a position where they're more likely to placate, people please. That could have been a diffusal strategy growing up with. If there was conflict, they might have just naturally overextended. They might be struggling with their self-worth or their self-esteem, which would have been further compounded by being in a controlling or maybe abusive relationship. And it's not always to say physically abusive. Like, I work with a lot of clients that have dealt with very, 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 very serious emotional abuse, prolonged emotional abuse over a long period of time. And that is so, so, so fucking damaging, and it does take time to rebuild and work through that. But this is the point of taking that time to attend to yourself after a breakup, learning how to self-soothe, self-regulate, connecting back to the self, the essence of who you are, especially if you've lost that in a relationship where you've put your partner on a pedestal, or you've overextended and you've made everything about them, and you've completely forgot about your own needs. You forgot about your own life. You've become who they needed you to be in order to be seen as worthy or enough or to be loved by them. And there's all this disorientation that can happen sometimes then when the relationship ends. And sometimes it ends fucking abruptly. And this is one of the other things that reminds me of grief. Because if somebody dies very, very suddenly, there's all that shock and there's all that overwhelm. And that's similar when a relationship ends out of the blue and the person's completely dysregulated and they didn't think it was going to happen. They didn't know why it was going to happen. And there's all that can happen as well. And they have to ground themselves, process it, and move through it. And you go at your own pace. There's no timeline for like how soon after that you should be over it. And that's another thing that can be a bit unhelpful with friends and family. It's like, oh, you should be over it by now. Like, you need the time to process and heal from what you've went through. And that's why we need support systems in place, like whether that's mental health services or whatever outlets you use, your sense of community or the people that you lean on. But it's necessary. And I also think like doing things that, and I think I mentioned this in the previous episode about building your sense of confidence, that sense of achievement, that sense of identity is so important, especially if you're struggling with how you're feeling. But anyway, I think I went in a bit of a rant. It's not just about having somebody to buffer loneliness, and it's not just about tolerating certain things within a relationship to make it work. Like, there's certain conditions that need to be in a place for a relationship to function. Like, in my eyes, there needs to be respect. There needs to be mutual respect for each other. You need to feel supported. You need to feel like you can turn to this person, that person's going to be there for you when you need them. You obviously need to trust each other. Like, that's huge in this day and age, but you need to know that you have each other's back. You need to know that you can totally trust them, because that's a massive foundation of safety as well. That's huge. Boundaries, I feel like are important. Like, there needs to be boundaries. You need to be able to establish boundaries even with your partner, boundaries with yourself, boundaries with your friends and family. And that shouldn't be seen as like being adversarial or being confrontational. It's just about establishing appropriate behavior. And that is part and parcel of how we establish respect. And also space. You need to be able to have space to be in your own, to be together, to decompress, all those different things. That shouldn't be seen as like neglect in the relationship or not a sign of love. Like, space, do you be in yourself or to be out and about with like your friends? Obviously there's nuance to this conversation. It's not just fucking rhyming stuff off, but like, you do need space to like go out and be in your own, to get grounded. You do need space to be around your friends and family, either with your partner or without your partner. And then also you need quality time together, because that's part of what helps you bond and feel connected. And also, a big thing, that I think is often overlooked is you need to feel that the person knows how to connect with you in a way that makes you feel loved, makes you feel appreciated, makes you feel valued, makes you feel significant to them, that they are invested in the relationship, that they have shown that they're trying to understand you, that they're showing that they want to make you feel special, that they want to feel connected. Very, very straightforward way of doing this is like trying to find out their love language, like what makes them feel really, really special or appreciated or seen. Like, is it physical touch? Is it words of affirmation? Is it gift giving? Is it quality time? Is it yada, 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 yada? But actually doing that and putting the effort on. Um, what else was I going to say there? So I think that's all relevant. I think it's important, to kind of reflect upon. And obviously, the reason that we do this in the aftermath of a relationship is so that you can put yourself in good stead. When you start dating and you start to go into the next relationship, that you're clear on what you don't want. You're clear and not repeating an unconscious pattern. That means also taking responsibility for your part in the dance, looking at like how you may have contributed to certain conflict escalating, the things that you may or may have done that weren't helpful. As I previously mentioned, like your conditioning, why you coped, understanding why you coped the way you coped, why you communicated the way you communicated, your relational expectations. What do I expect from a partner and why? Is this reasonable? Is it unreasonable? Why do I expect these things? What do I feel like a partner expects of me? And that's also a good thing to kind of wrap your head around, because their expectations may or not be totally rational as well. But I think like, if you've just come out of a breakup and you know that there's a lot of stuff that wasn't functioning. Like, one of the things that you do need to kind of reflect on is, was I able to be my whole, complete, authentic, true self with this person? Did I have to tone this down? Did I have to hold this back? Was it not safe for me to do this? Um, did I have to hide parts of myself? Did I have to sacrifice elements of who I was to make this relationship work? Did I have to put my goals, my hopes, my dreams in the back burner? Did I let go of opportunities? Did I let go of friends and family to make this relationship function? Like, there's a lot of stuff that you could be exploring in the aftermath. Um, and it's hard, but like, see, when you realize that a relationship is really bad for you, or it was really bad for your mental health. And I'm not saying all breakups are like this. Sometimes you can love a person and it mightn't work out. That's really shit, because you could be like, look, I love them, but there's so many things that aren't working in this situation. They're not really a bad person. There's just a lot of stuff that's not clicking. They're not willing to make certain compromises, or they aren't willing to do the work. And it's just not going to work. So there's grief connected to that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be this massive big rupture, and you can still love the person and still miss them and recognize, this isn't going to help me. This isn't going to add to my quality of life. I can love this person and let it go. And I can also let it go knowing that it's for the best. And that's part of the grieving process, is missing the person. It's learning how to self-soothe and regulate and being able to cope in that way. And that's like that can be tough. I think that can be a really, really difficult thing to kind of sit with. But in saying that, there's a lot of different things that can come into why relationships end. Conflict is one of the big ones that I mentioned. A person not putting the effort in is also a huge one. People taking the relationship for granted. Communication breaking down, there being no intimacy, physical, non-physical, emotional intimacy. People can grow and change as the relationship evolves. You might have different goals, hopes, dreams, aspirations for the future. You might realize through having been with this person for a certain period of time that you're on a very different page from what you want from life. You might have very, very different values and expectations. Again, coming back to the things that I was saying about boundaries, there could be like a pattern of disrespect. It could be all one-way traffic. It could just be a case of my way or the highway. The person could be completely demeaning you, disregarding what you're saying and asking for. You might find that you've attempted to set boundaries with this person. You've asked for what you want. You've been patient with them. You've communicated why this is necessary. You've done all those things to try and make this work, and this person is still disregarding and overlooking your point of view. And you've come to that conclusion, like, this just isn't functioning. This isn't okay. You may have found that when you really tried to be yourself, really, really tried to be yourself in this person's energy, that they made you feel that that was wrong or shameful, or that it wasn't enough, or that they maybe humiliated you or demeaned you or teased you or put you down, and that made you feel like you needed to hide those parts of yourself. Or they might have made remarks that other people find you embarrassing, or that they find you embarrassing. Just, that's shit behavior. But if you feel like you have to hold yourself back, tone yourself down, that's not to say, like, look, I could go on all day about nuance and context, but the thing is, if you can't be yourself in the relationship, that's a massive, massive issue in itself. Um, Part of this is also recognizing, like, what are you settling for, or what did you settle for in the relationship? Like, did you settle for the bare minimum, and why? Why did you settle for the bare minimum? Why did you tolerate the behavior that you tolerated? Why did you let it go on for as long as what you would let it go on for? And the truth is, there's maybe a part of you that probably loved this person and maybe still does, even in the aftermath of the breakup. But you also need to come back to you, what you needed from the relationship. And, were you being treated with respect? Were you given, were you treated like an equal human being? Was there reciprocity and effort? Were you made to feel like loved, valued, appreciated? Were they treating you the way you deserve to be treated as a human being? And that's this thing about the needs that I'm saying again, like, your emotional needs, your physical needs, your needs for quality time, your need for time apart, all those things. Are your needs being met? Are you even aware of what your needs are? Have you even defined that for yourself? Like, what do you want in a partner? What do you want? What do you value in a partner? What do you value from a relationship? Being clear on that, and then also being able to communicate it. So it's not just a case of, that person should know. I shouldn't have to tell them. They should just know. That's all things that you can reflect on. Sometimes you might feel that the actual container of the relationship might have been holding you back from doing the things that you really wanted to do in life, like traveling, open business, For some people, it could be like having a family, the other partner might be ready. There could be loads of different things, but that might stop you from growing and doing the things that you want to do. For some people, it could just be the realization that they just don't want to be in that relationship anymore. It's become exhausting, or it's become draining, or they're just not feeling it. There's loads of reasons why that might happen. But I think it's just something to be aware of when you're reflecting after a relationship. And look, it takes time. It takes time to process it. It takes time to heal. It takes time to move through all the emotions that's going to come up. And I think, just coming back to what I was saying there earlier about really kind of fucking volatile relationships where people have had maybe a lot of conflict, or there's been a lot of hurt caused and a lot of things said, or there's maybe been traumatic elements or infidelity or betrayal or loads of different things happening. You might struggle to let it go because there's so much anger or disappointment or frustration and hurt. And really, underneath all that, there's probably a lot of sadness and a lot of grief that needs to be held and processed. And choosing to get support to let it go doesn't mean that you're diminishing what actually happened, or that you're just suddenly now going to get over it. It doesn't mean like it didn't matter. It doesn't take away the impact that that's had on you. It doesn't reduce its significance. It's just that you're allowing yourself to be in the feelings, they let that out of your nervous system, they let it out of your emotional space so that you're supported and held and validated through that experience, and that you're able to heal, learn from it, and move forward so that that's not impacting on your ability to show up as your best, most authentic self and get what you actually fucking need and deserve from a quality relationship with somebody that actually loves you, that wants to be with you, that puts on that effort, that shows you that they value and they appreciate the relationship. We've got shared plans together, and there's reciprocity, and they're enthusiastic, and I don't want to be painting like this kind of romanticized idea, like but they're invested in the relationship. Where things go wrong, they're not fucking adversarial. They're looking to sit down and learn from it and work on it, and they're open minded, and they're willing to kind of be in the shit and not run away from it and talk about it. Um, that you have similar values, just that you feel that level of connection, you feel that safety, you feel that security, you know that they've got your back, you know that they're there when you need them, they show up and they're consistent, and that safety is established. Anyway, I think that was a bit of a rant. But as I say, breakups is something that I deal with regularly. Relationships, I could talk literally about all the different kinds of dynamics all day every day, but breakups comes up a lot, and I think there's a lot of misinformation that we get from friends and families about how we think we should act. Your main responsibility is to yourself. Doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. But I think like getting yourself grounded, setting boundaries for yourself, setting boundaries with the ex partner, and then getting support is one of the most important things you can do in the initial stages. And then I think learning from it, really, really learning from the conflict, learning from the pattern, the communication, the coping, understanding your expectations, understanding what was going on with them from your perspective, what came up, what you can learn, and what you can, what maybe you need to heal from or let go of. Understanding your process, like why did I stay as long as what I stayed? Was there something stopping me from creating change? There's obviously, because I'm speaking in a generalized way, I don't really have a specific context here that I can dive into and show you, but that those are things that you can reflect on yourself and start to journal on, and actually start to unpack your own stuff. And then even when you explore, like in the therapeutic container, when you start to look at your own family of origin, you might see similarities in some of the behavior. You might see some of the similarities in some of your expectations or your values. And as an adult revisiting that, part of it's about learning like what do I want to let go of, what do I want to change or transform, what do I want to experience in my next relationship. And we can be grateful and appreciative of the positive elements of the relationship for what they taught us about what we value and what we like. And we can also look at the negative aspects of the relationship because they've taught us what we don't want. And we can also learn from them so that we don't fall into that pattern again. So it doesn't become this endless cycle of conflict, of betrayal, of people pleasing, settling for less than you deserve, tolerating abusive behavior. And there's a lot of healing that can come from that, and that puts you in the driving seat. It brings back personal responsibility to you, and it means that you're able to make wiser, more well-informed, more congruent choices going forward. So I hope that helped. Let me know what you thought. If you have any questions at all, hit me up on Instagram, send me a few messages. And thanks so much for listening.